Subcommittee. We're going to meet today discussing the Traffic Task Force report outlining the 10 intersections, recording the most accidents in the city of Lowell. Roll call, please.
Chairman Laurie.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah.
Councilor Madonza.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you very much. We're going to refer to the task force book, and in it, I think on page 3, for the councilors who have it, there's 10 intersections that are listed that are recorded as the 10 with the most accidents in the city. And I think all of these are in the top 200 or 100 in the state as well. So it's a good place to start for the Transportation Subcommittee. Anyone want to ask any questions before we start?
Well, if they would just, I don't know if there's a presentation on plans for these intersections that are already in the works, or if we could go through that.
Mr. Bakey?
Yes, good evening, and thank you for holding this meeting, for the chance to go over, I think, a topic that's of interest to probably a lot of people who use the city as drivers, residents, or businesses. One of the things that was reported in the Traffic Task Force report was a listing of the 10 intersections which have the highest frequency of accidents. And this is excluding ones that are connected to the highway system. So the highway on-ramps and things are not part of this, but the 10 other intersections. And that's based on a report that Mass DOT puts together and puts out every year. And at the time this document was released, the most recent report was from 2007, utilized accident data from the period 2007 to 2010. So bear in mind for everyone here today and who's paying attention at home, this was the order and this was the list of the highest accident locations in that period of time. And what we'd like to go through this evening, we have, with the aid of the monitors here, we actually have images of all of these intersections. And I have with me the city engineer, Lisa DeMeo, and the city's transportation engineer, Eric Eby. And what we'd like to do is basically have Eric walk through each of these intersections and discuss what some of the issues at them are, as well as what has been happening since 2010 when that accident data was recorded. In a couple of cases, the problems have been addressed since then, and what is in the works to happen over the next couple of years. And I think what I'm pleased to say is that I think in all of these locations, there are at least modest improvements that either have happened since 2010 or will be happening. And in most of these cases, there are quite significant improvements that we can report on that I think it would be useful for people to know about. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric and let him walk through them.
Just for the record, before we start, I just want to list the 10 so people at home know what we're talking about. Number 1 is Bridge Street at the VFW Highway. Number 2, Middlesex Street and Wood Street. 3, Varnum Ave at Mammoth Road, School Street and Riverside. 4, Church and Appleton. 5, Westford Street and Wilder. 6, Pawtucket and School Street. 7, Thorndike at Highland Street. 8, VFW Highway at Aiken Street. 9, Plain Street at Chelmsford Street. And 10, University Ave at Riverside Street. Mr. Eby, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'll go through these intersections in order here on the presentation screen. And if the light isn't working, then I can point to them. I'll get up and point to them as well. The first one, Bridge and VFW, the state made some changes last year to the signal timing and signal phasing at this intersection to give left turns coming over the bridge out of downtown a left turn green arrow, so they're protected movements at the same time as a left turn coming down Bridge Street. These are done to increase the safety at the intersection. At the same time, though, increase the pedestrian phase at this intersection, giving the pedestrians more green time to cross the intersection. And when the pedestrian button is pushed, it stops all the traffic for 40 seconds. And this has caused significant problems with the coordination between those two signals, the one at Lakeview Ave and the one at Bridge Street. The state has been working to try to make that work as best as possible, but there is no solution to it until the long-term construction plan starts next year. As part of that process, the state will put this plan into effect, which will widen the VFW highway to provide a left turn lane and a right turn lane at Bridge Street, as well as adding another left turn lane on Bridge Street coming down from Centerville. The leg of the intersection in front of CVS will be closed off. That will become a pedestrian walkway area. And all the traffic coming in and out of Lakeview will need to use a signal over at Lakeview Avenue. And at that time, they may be able to, but at that time, the signal equipment will all be replaced and it will all work as one intersection. The coordination problem will be fixed at that time. So you won't have the long, lengthy delays on VFW Highway that you do right now. The next intersection is Middlesex and Wood Street, near the new Walgreens. This intersection was just, there's been several improvements at this intersection as part of the Walgreens project. As part of the Rourke Bridge study, they've identified many improvements at this intersection. They've all been implemented by the Walgreens proponent. The only item left to do at this intersection is a long-term, if the Rourke Bridge goes out to 4 lanes in the future, then this intersection would need to be widened to accommodate that improvement. But until that point, there really isn't much that can be done at this intersection. All the improvements have been done. The Walgreens proponent put in new signal heads, green left turn arrows. They widened Middlesex Street in front of the Walgreens to add a right turn slip lane onto the Rourke Bridge. They redid the pavement markings, new signage, new pedestrian equipment, signals. So it's made a substantial improvement at this intersection as far as safety already. It's another factor that's impacting this intersection, though, is the other side of the Rourke Bridge up on Pawtucket Boulevard. You can see here in this slide, Pawtucket Boulevard along the top, Middlesex Street along the bottom. There's about 2,000 feet between the intersections, but the traffic going over the Rourke Bridge in the evening especially is so heavy that the traffic will queue up from Pawtucket Boulevard all the way across the bridge into Middlesex Street intersection, impacting that intersection. The one thing we're going to do at the Pawtucket Boulevard intersection is to replace the signal detection equipment. Right now, there's loops in the pavement that detect when a car is there and tells the signal when to turn green for each approach. Those loop detectors are all broken and they need to be replaced. What we're going to do is replace it with a video detection system, a camera at the intersection that will sense when a vehicle is approaching on each approach and can efficiently allocate the green time accordingly. That project we're out to bid right now on that. We should be opening bids at the end of the month for February 1st. And at that point, we will choose a contractor and get that video detection system installed.
On a video detection system itself, I ride a motorcycle, and especially down here in front of the Songa Center, I'll go through light after light after light. It just nothing detects you there. Will the newer equipment pick up motorcycles and things like that?
Yeah, the video detection can pick up anything that's in there in the zone. And it can be adjusted to, if it's not picking up, it can be adjusted to become more sensitive or, to pick out more of an area. So it's not dependent on a hunk of metal on a car or a motorcycle tripping over these magnetic detectors anymore. It's all video sensing. So that will go into effect within the next month or so. We'll put that detection equipment in place, and that'll help the flow of traffic over the bridge. One question that's been raised is, can all those signals along Wood Street be coordinated from Pawtucket Boulevard over the bridge and down Westward Street? But as part of the Rourke Bridge study, the consultant has looked at that and said that no, we can't coordinate the signals because the side street traffic, such as Middlesex Street or Pawtucket Boulevard, Princeton Boulevard, Westford Street, they all have a lot of traffic coming out of them as well. So it's not possible to just designate all the green time for the corridor along Wood Street. You would be just queuing back the traffic on the side streets too much. So the coordination wouldn't work in this corridor. But they have identified other improvements that can be done along the corridor. These are the volumes here, Middlesex Street and Wood Street to your left. And it shows you that there's a heavy volume on all 4 approaches. So that's why you can't do the coordination, because you just can't give all the time to one corridor. The next intersection this is the subject of the WBZ report this past fall. Mammoth, Riverside School, and Varnum Ave. This is number 1 in the state in their last report as far as the highest accident location. The state and the city conducted a road safety audit at this location a couple of years ago and identified several short, medium, and long-term improvements that could be done at the location. And As of this past fall, all those improvements have been completed except for one, which was the pavement markings that has to wait for warmer weather. State will do those when it warms up in the spring. But they've fixed the signals to make them work better, put up new signage, back plates on the signals to make them more visible. And it's, okay. There's a list of all the improvements that were done. Changing the timings to be more efficient for green times, the signage, back plates. A tree was cut down in front of McDonald's that obscured visibility of the signal. Pedestrian heads have been replaced and they're working now. Push buttons have been replaced. Emergency vehicle equipment, the Opticom system was installed. So a lot of measures have been done at this location to improve the safety.
How long have the improvements been in place in this intersection?
This was done in 2010, the report came out. They've-
How-
Some of them started at that point.
Yeah.
It's been ongoing.
Have we shown a reduction in accidents at that intersection since the improvements have been made?
Well, the state's list of accidents was just prior to when this road safety audit was
Right.
conducted, so it doesn't reflect in the current data. We haven't compiled any data since 2010 to see if the changes have,
It'd be interesting to see if we've had a decrease in the accidents at the intersection.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
This next intersection is Church at Appleton and Central. This is downtown Towers Corner. The intersection of Church and Central, and there's three signals here in this triangular area. And what we've done recently is to install GPS units to coordinate the three signals so that they all are synchronized and run together. For the most part, it's been an improvement. However, we are still experiencing a problem at Church and Central because it has an exclusive pedestrian phase. When the pedestrian pushes a button at that intersection, it stops all traffic and allows the pedestrians to cross. But the other signals don't take that into account, so it throws the synchronization off, and it takes a few cycles to get back in sync. We're working on possibly putting the pedestrian phase into concurrent phasing, so that the pedestrians will cross the street at the same time the cars have the green, and the cars will yield if they have to take a right turn. Next intersection is Westford and Wilder Street. This is currently a four-way stop location. Mass DOT has a program. They've identified this as one of the top 30 locations in the city that needs to have new stop signs put in. What they're going to do is put in oversized stop signs on each side of each approach, so you'll have a total of 8 stop signs at this intersection. And in addition, they'll have advanced warning signs saying stop sign ahead. And they'll also paint thermoplastic center lines on each approach to the intersection to make it more visible and redo the stop lines as well. And that, they've awarded the contract to the contractor, but they're waiting for good weather now to come out and put the signs and paint marks in. This is the intersection of School Street and Pawtucket Street. This is one of the intersections that's been identified in several studies that is needing improvement. The signal equipment is very outdated and doesn't meet current standards. The city has just signed a contract with a consultant to redesign the signal equipment at this intersection, and we hope to have this under construction this year. It would be new equipment. It would have green arrows for the left turn from Pawtucket Street onto School Street, reduce the confusion and not knowing who has the right-of-way out at that location. There's a high accident, and there's a high congestion too because the traffic comes back from the other side of the bridge. The consultant for the Rourke Bridge study has identified the signals on either end of this bridge as needing coordination. These would be a good candidate for synchronization. But that's working with the state owns the intersection on the other side, and we own this one, so we'd have to work together on that. Also, there's signals further up Pawtucket Street. There will be one going in at Fletcher Street as part of the University Ave Bridge, and the one at Merrimack Street will be new, and the one at VFW Highway. Those three will be interconnected in a closed-loop system, and we'd like to see if we can get this one added to that closed-loop system as well to coordinate along Pawtucket Street. Our consultant will be looking at that as part of the design. This is the intersection of Thorndike Street and Highland Street. The signal here only turns, red for Thorndike when you need to make that left turn onto Highland Street and the right turn from Highland. Not sure why there's a lot of accidents at this location. It could be that, just confusion, people forcing their way into the right lane when the signal is red, sideswiping. We don't have any improvements located, identified yet for this location. There is improvements up at the driveway to the LRTA as part of the Hamilton Canal project, but the roadway is widened on Thorndike Street, but the intersection here itself is not planned to do any improvements. But there is, there's other situations. The next intersection down is YMCA Drive, and then you have the on-ramp to the Lowell connector. And a lot of the traffic coming in the evening, coming down Thorndike Street, is all trying to get into that right lane to get onto the connector. And really, a long-term solution needs to be worked out to get the 2 lanes onto the connector at that point, and help that traffic move along. This is the intersection of VFW and Aiken Street. This intersection was also the subject of a road safety audit by Mass DOT a couple of years ago, and they identified several short-term, medium-term, and long-term improvements at the location, and they have all mostly been implemented. There was a list of them here. They did retime the signals for more efficient green time. Pavement markings were reapplied. They fixed the detector loops in the pavement, fixed the pedestrian buttons where needed. A wheelchair ramp was reconstructed. A dip in the road was fixed. Emergency equipment. There was, the emergency Opticom equipment was not put in. That was one item that wasn't done yet. But they've done everything else out there that's on this list. The trees look like, if they did trim the trees in the median, they need to be done again. But other than that, they've got most of the items on the list done. This is the intersection of Plain, Chelmsford, and Powell. And this intersection was recently finished reconstruction. I believe it was 2010 that was finished up, which, the data in this high accident location was up through 2010, so it doesn't really reflect the improvements that were made here. The major change is this location being Powell Street, one way away from the intersection now, so you don't have that entering traffic. There were sidewalk improvements, lane changes, repainting, new signal equipment, so it had it was well over $500,000 worth of improvements at this location. And we should see that intersection come down the list now when future reports coming out. And that's a picture of how it was before the improvement project that finished up in 2010. Nope. And the last intersection on the list is University Avenue and Riverside Street. And this is one of the 4 intersections that we've hired the consultant to do the design for a new signal at this location. This is a very old signal equipment, just posts on the corner, no pedestrian crossing equipment. Right. So this will be redesigned, and we also hope to get this constructed this year, new signal equipment. It will help the university crossing with all the students on the streets.
Tomorrow night, we're going to be looking at Thursday night, the public forum for the new Rourke Bridge, and several of the sites listed in this study are going to be a factor in that bridge, and they're a factor in one surprise a little farther down, and I don't think it will impact this. They want to put a light at the corner of Riverside and VFW to make left turns possible, and I think everyone was a little surprised. But the only other comment I'd like to make now is Chelmsford Street, inbound on Chelmsford Street. I think the biggest cause of confusion I see is there's 2 lanes of traffic and you don't see a right-hand turn until you get close to the lights, and then you see that right-hand turn. So you see a lot of cars trying to jockey back over to the middle. But other than that, I'm over in that intersection quite a bit, and the traffic just seems to flow very well. So the improvements that, at least we're trying to make, we're making as we go along, seem to be, but I'd like to see what the accident rate is now at the corner of, if we could get those statistics, the Varnum Ave, Mammoth, just to see, since these improvements have been made, has there been a decrease in accidents? Any question? Oh, I'd like to welcome Councilor Rita Mercier and Resna Noon and Rodney Elliott. All have come to the meeting. Any questions? Councilor Mendonça.
Going back to number 1 on the list, which was the Bridge Street and VFW, Councilor Laurie and I were at a neighborhood meeting last night, and of course, this remains an issue for them since the change of the timing. We know it's the pedestrian timing that's causing it. So I had a couple of questions. When they redesign it, it'll actually make the intersection less wide going from where it's CVS corner onto the bridge. Would that be a factor in improving pedestrian crossing timing, or is it not enough of a distance change?
Yeah. I think you're talking about that corner up there where Lakeview Ave exits the intersection.
Yeah, you're going to make that.
That gets closed
Even-
off here.
Exactly.
Yep.
I'm
So it
just
is-
wondering if that reduces the distance that the pedestrian would have to walk, and therefore the time.
It should. I mean, it's definitely making it lost, but they are adding turning lanes on the other side of VFW Highway, so I don't know if
Oh,
that
yeah.
overall width changes or how much it changes.
Well, the dotted line at the top is where it is now. Well, it's kind of the middle of the screen there. So, I mean, that's where Lakeview Ave came out. So now the sidewalk's going to go further out onto where Lakeview Ave was, and actually should make that a little narrower. It's
It
hard to
should.
tell.
You're correct. It will definitely make it narrower. The additional turn lane is actually taken out of the median in that location. So in fact, it does reduce the crossing distance. It is possible that that will reduce what Mass DOT will ultimately conclude is necessary if they maintain an exclusive pedestrian phase in terms of the amount of time. However, we continue to feel that a more appropriate solution, both in the short term and the long term, would be for them to switch from the exclusive phasing to concurrent phasing at this location as well, which would mean there would not be a time where traffic in all directions is stopped to wait for pedestrians who more often than not have already crossed long ago with the traffic. And so if we are ultimately successful, and I have to admit that Mass DOT does not share our enthusiasm for that idea, but if we are successful, then that will really eliminate this as a concern, and we do see it as a major driver as to why there has been such an uptick in delays at that location recently.
And I would prefer concurrent signaling as well, but as you stated, it's a state intersection. It's their desire to make it exclusive. I think it's going to be a very hard road to make them change their minds. One of the residents that was at the meeting yesterday was interested in having like a pedestrian bridge. I know there are probably issues with that, but I don't know if, Eric, if you could maybe give us your thoughts on would it help or not help, or?
Well, theoretically, it would help, but there's a lot of logistical issues. The grades, it has to be handicap accessible. So you need to be able to get the wheelchairs up onto the bridge. And you're dealing with grades and how far back that goes to make the grades acceptable for the handicapped access. And even if you have a bridge, you have to get people to use it. You have to fence off the highway or something to keep people from using the street.
So, I mean, that was my thought as well, is you got to get people to use it and not use the street. So you'd almost have to prohibit use of crossing at street level.
Yeah. some
They
physical
did say
barrier.
that once they block off Lakeview Ave, at least on that side, you could use that land for the ramp, so to speak. The other side had some space, but again, I think the issue is going to come down to how can we get people to actually use it and feel safe doing so, and actually desire that, and then we wouldn't have to stop traffic on the VFW highway so that they could cross. Of course, there'd still be issues with possibly, I think, people crossing Bridge Street to get to the overhead pedestrian bridge.
Yeah, I think I think it's pretty safe to say that it is almost impossible to envision an overhead pedestrian bridge at that location. I think to put some actual numbers on the scale of what you would need, if you think about it, typically you'd want about 15 feet clear underneath the bridge from the roadway. The bridge itself would have a minimum of a foot-thick structure underneath the walking surface of the bridge, potentially more than that. So you have at least 16 feet. And you have to have, for every inch of vertical distance, in order to comply with the ADA, you need to have a foot of linear ramp.
Yeah.
So you would end up with about 200 feet of ramp that you would need to accommodate on each side. And under the ADA, you can't have more than 30 feet of continuous ramp without breaking it with a landing. So you have to add all of those landings. In order to accommodate that, you would need really an enormous piece of real estate on each side. I mean, you're correct that possibly the land that we are getting back from the VFW, or from the Lakeview Avenue right-of-way, might be enough. but you would end up basically adding such a tremendous distance to the amount that any pedestrian would need to walk, just setting aside the fact that it's all uphill, just to get up onto that bridge, that it is almost impossible to imagine, and this has been borne out in almost every location where these types of pedestrian bridges have been installed. People don't use them because they're inconvenient and unattractive to the pedestrian. So the pedestrian ends up down in the road trying to figure out how to cross the road and climb the fence in the middle and whatever you do to try to keep them away. So you end up spending an inordinate amount of money and using up an inordinate amount of real estate for a structure that no one ever uses, and often creating more of a safety hazard situation because you have pedestrians crossing now in an extremely unsafe way as they try to avoid going up over the bridge. So I think it's very unlikely that that would be part of the mix at this location. Again, I think we will continue to push hard for the concurrent phasing as a way of actually achieving the same result, where there is no delay associated with accommodating the pedestrians, but do it in a much more practical and safer manner.
I guess an other comment is more general, but particularly I think for Pawtucket Street at School Street, in intersections like that where there's a delayed green, and oftentimes people that are familiar with the intersection know that I can go, the other people aren't going to move, but people that are not from the area can often sit at the intersection for 5-10 seconds waiting for the traffic to come at them when it's not moving, and that's like 3 or 4 cars that don't make it through that intersection, that cycle. So I'm pleased that we're going to be doing something about that, and we should prioritize on upgrading any of those intersections where those, right now, the delayed signal is desirable to provide an unobstructed left turn signal. If we could upgrade that signaling and get the green arrows and the appropriate electronics to make them function properly, I'm certainly all in favor of it. So I'm glad to see it's going to happen very soon.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Adam, or to Eric, I guess. Just roughly, what is the timeline from now to a solution?
For which intersection?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still at Bridge Street.
Okay, the bridge in VFW, what the state informed us when we met down at a meeting coordinated by Senator Donahue was that they were going to bid the project in March of 2014. What that then means, that's the sort of a milestone. They then typically, the Mass DOT takes about 6 months from when they bid a project to when they actually give a notice to proceed to a contractor. So it'd be about 6 months after March, so approximately September of 2014, they would be providing that notice to proceed to a contractor. And I believe they said that this would be about a 2-year project. So you'd be looking at about 2 years worth of construction activity out there. And obviously it's a little longer than what it otherwise would be because they need to maintain traffic access throughout the intersection, throughout the construction duration. If they could just shut it down, I bet they could do it a lot faster, but I don't think that would be a very popular solution.
On the pedestrian bridge, and I can understand that that's expensive and that there may just not be enough room there, but would that be included in the study? Would they look at that as a possible solution?
Well, I think at this point they have moved beyond the study phase. They are actually in the phase where they're completing the construction documents to put this out to bid. So at this point, I think the opportunity to even introduce that concept has passed. But again, I think for the reasons that I detailed earlier, I wouldn't recommend it, and I highly doubt Mass DOT would embrace it either.
Yeah, they have those bridges down on Starrow Drive, and I've used them, and they seem to be okay, but that's kind of because you'd be taking your life in your own hands to cross on Starrow Drive, and it's really really isn't all that bad. I can't think of any place else other than on Starrow Drive where I've seen pedestrian bridges. I'm sure they exist elsewhere, but
there aren't many. They were very popular in the 70s and early 80s, and that's where when a lot of them got installed in various places. I think one that I'm aware of that's most similar to this type of circumstance is there's actually one down on Columbia Road in Dorchester, and they've had to erect high fencing with spikes on top and down the median of Columbia Road to keep people from going across in order to make them use the pedestrian bridge, which has these enormous ramps that, no pedestrian would really want to use. And I think it sort of illustrates exactly why. And then you also end up with a big piece of infrastructure that has significant maintenance expenses down the road as well. So this isn't just a one-time expense up front to build it, which would significantly add to the cost of the project, but you also have an ongoing maintenance responsibility with it as well.
Okay, and so as they're proceeding along slowly but surely, the solution should come in the latter part of 2016, that would be what the...
I think if their schedule does not slip at all, that is when we would look to see this project being done.
Lisa?
Mass DOT and I made arrangements today. The next step in their process to involve the public is the final public meeting. And this is a scoop for you, because we just booked the room today. March 6th at 6:30 in the library conference room will be the next and the last public meeting on the VFW at Bridge Street.
Okay. And then my final question, I guess, and maybe this is a little late to be asking it, but was any thought given to recessing the crosswalks? I mean, I guess I would imagine that most of the pedestrian traffic is north-south, on Bridge Street, along Bridge Street. And so would that make sense at all, or does that just move the problem to another spot? If there was a pedestrian walkway that was recessed, let's say, I don't know, 50 yards down the VFW, either way, does that make any sense, or is that?
When you say recessed, do you mean
You move it
pushed
down.
away,
Instead of
moved away
it
from
being that you cross at Bridge, you'd go down to, let's say, to where the lights are on Lakeview Ave, or up to where, where the old Coca-Cola place used to be. Dating myself now, I guess, but, so you'd move it either up or down, and so the crosswalk would be there instead of right on the intersection where it stops for 4.
I think there's a couple of challenges with that. One, you typically want to have the crossing in front of where you want the cars to stop. So if you were to pull the crosswalks back, you would also be likely pulling the stop bars back, and that would actually increase the size of the intersection, which would actually increase delays because there would be a larger area that vehicles would have to travel through before being able to get to their destination. And the other problem with that from the pedestrian point of view is that the more you deviate from the desire path of where the pedestrian actually wants to go, the more likely you're going to have pedestrians not follow and not actually get into the crosswalk, but take their desire path. So even if you move the crosswalk back and you move the vehicles back to be safe, you would likely have the pedestrians crossing where the crosswalk is actually proposed, even if the actual crosswalk is pushed back a bit. So it's pretty likely that would create some additional problems for both vehicles and pedestrians if you went that route.
Okay, I think that, and I'm sure the same is true for other members of the subcommittee, that this is this intersection impacts not just people in Centerville, but people throughout the city. And as you end up talking to people, everybody's got a solution. So it's good just probably to air a couple of those out. I had heard about the pedestrian bridge, and I agree that there's probably not room there, and that maybe that's not the best way to go, and it would be expensive and timely and so forth. But still, every idea is worth considering, right?
It's absolutely true, and very often you find that the best ideas come from the most unusual sources. So,
thank you.
On the crosswalk, the overhead, did the university look at that too with the new work bridge? On the University Ave. Did they briefly look at putting one of them up there?
I think it was talked about, but
Right.
there's even less real estate there to be able to handle the
Absolutely.
ramping. I think I don't think it's physically possible to put one at that location, especially on the, I guess what would be the east side, where the majority of the pedestrians, the students, are crossing to get from East Campus to North Campus. They're just on the university side of the highway there. There really is almost no land to land an
Right.
elaborate ramping structure.
And that's probably the heaviest intersection for pedestrian use out of all the ones we've talked about today.
Yep.
And I know they at least looked at it, and I'm on the board at NEMCOG, and you are looking about 2 years down the line for this intersection to be completed, and once they start the bidding process. And I want to welcome, is it Lieutenant Crowley? Lieutenant Crowley, thank you for being here tonight. Is there any other questions from anyone in the public, the councilors here? No, I guess that's it. Yeah, Joe? Councilman Danza.
This isn't about these 10 intersections, but it is in the report, and I remember we had talked about this intersection before, the one at Lawrence Street at Church, where Lawrence Street ends at Church. And I know some time ago there was talk about addressing that intersection as part of the Hamilton Canal District, and I'm just wondering, what are the current plans for that intersection?
Sure, yeah, you have a good memory. The Hamilton Canal MIPA filing, because of the scale of the Hamilton Canal development itself, its traffic impacts were believed to be pretty widespread, and that was one of the intersections that was identified as having some of the impact from the full build of the Hamilton Canal District. So as a result, there were improvements recommended for that location, including the installation of a signal. And using a state grant that we were able to receive, we actually engaged VHB to design that signal for us as part of working toward the Hamilton Canal District. And now, fortunately, the same contractor, VHB, actually won the bid for the permanent design of that. That's one of the 4 locations that we expect to improve using funding through the capital plan process. 2 of them were the 2 that Eric mentioned so far this evening. And the last one is Westford and School Street. And so we do hope that as part of that, we'll be issuing a contract to have a signal installed at that location, along with the University in Riverside and School in Pawtucket intersections as well, and hopefully we'll be able to move ahead with that. That will require the council to continue to support the capital plan as you have been, and recognize that funding intersection improvements is an important thing for the city. We certainly appreciate that this council has stepped forward and done that to, and that's something that really hasn't happened in the past, so we definitely acknowledge the wisdom of this council in doing that, and hopefully that will continue, and we can continue to work on these intersections around the city that need improvement.
If, with council support, I can't guarantee that right now, but what would be the timeline? I mean, the earliest you think it could be done?
Well, as I said, VHB is now under contract to do the engineering. It should not take too terribly long, especially at that location where the basic design was already prepared by the same firm. So it's just a matter of putting it in proper bid package format in that case. We certainly expect that will be done in time for us to probably bid this work in the spring and be ready to ideally be under construction with the beginning of fiscal 14.
Okay, thank you.
One last question, I guess, before, Thursday night, the planning companies that are looking at the Rourke Bridge, they're going to be talking about the lights somewhere between University Ave, the new Rourke Bridge, if it goes in its present location, Wood Street corridor, the Highlands, putting in lights at, I think, Westford and Stedman. If, for some reason, this bridge doesn't become a reality, would we be looking at that plan of synchronizing the lights in those areas to continue, at least on what they found?
Well, I think it's been the work that has been being done as part of that study is valuable, even in the event that the larger project doesn't materialize or takes some time, and that just they've been able to study and document and identify appropriate improvements to a lot of locations. Now, I was very pleased when I saw their most recent presentation to see that an awful lot of the areas where they've identified for improvements, there actually are improvements in the works, not dissimilar from the list we just went through this evening, including some overlap. So I think we will take very seriously their recommendations and attempt to address them. Obviously, there is also a matter of fiscal reality attached to both the big project as well as some of these smaller items that may or may not be in conjunction with the big project, and so everything's sort of subject to appropriation or identification of funding. But we definitely appreciate the identification of a lot of these issues and being able to move ahead with them, and we certainly don't disagree with most of the conclusions they have in that.
I serve on the committee presently, and there's probably only 2 ways that bridge won't be done, is one, the funding falls through, or 2, the other option is they talk about Vinyl Square, which I just don't see happening. So I think that bridge will be built where it is, probably more lined up with Old Ferry Road, and that's my guess. But they've done a lot of work on the lights, on synchronizing those lights coming into the city. And with the work we've done, I think there's some relief down the line for the citizens of Lowell. Thank you. Any other questions? Any councilors? Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. This one's for Lieutenant Crowley. I seem to have noticed in the last, I don't know, several months, 4 or 5 months, police officers doing a good job, by the way, at some of the more dangerous intersections as outlined by the state report, particularly VFW and Riverside, Mammoth Road. Increased enforcement. Is that a strategy by the police department to look at these dangerous intersections and even Middlesex and Wood Street? I see a police officer there during busy times to, I guess, stop gridlock or people blowing through those intersections. Is that your strategy? I mean, are you looking at these dangerous intersections? And I know people get upset because they get tickets, but I think it's a good thing.
We do target them. We use our own accident data. We use data from the state to assign our traffic units. And it does work. It's high visibility traffic enforcement at these intersections. The offset is there's only, especially like Middlesex and Wood, stopping cars in that intersection. It makes, you don't want to create a worse problem by now taking up a lane or stopping a car. So it's got to be done strategically. In the better weather, we like to use the motorcycles because it's a little more, maneuverability is a little easier. A lot of times we do it on foot because you don't want to stop. You identify the driver in the vehicle if it's, and we're looking for egregious violations, and unfortunately there's a lot of them. I mean, the markings in the street and the lighting is pretty good if we can just get people to abide by that. Most of the accidents that we're seeing are failing to yield and trying to beat the light. And that's what we target at these intersections, try to reduce the numbers. And so far, it's worked out pretty well.
And maybe it's too early to find out, but have you seen any decrease in accidents at these very dangerous intersections as a result of your efforts?
I don't have them broken down by intersection yet, but
Right.
we recently got our numbers from the state. For 2012, we had 468 fewer accidents than 2011.
Ah.
So I think we're doing a lot of things right at these locations.
Great, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. That's exactly the type of information I was looking for earlier. We're investing the money and the time, and the police are investing with the officers, their time into public safety. So to see a decrease of over 400 accidents in the city is certainly good news. If there's no other questions, I think we could call the meeting. Oh, Councilman Mendonça.
I'll move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Second? Thank you.